Welcome everyone to this part two of a very special part series with Shane Smith. This is Enlightened Masculinity. I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Yogi Chris, PhD, founder of Ninth Limb Yoga. And you know all about my stuff. You know, you can see it in the description. But this podcast is sponsored by Ninth Limb Yoga, so shout out to hashtag Ninth Limb. We have our co-host, Akash Inti-Katakam from Montclair, New Jersey, and our special guest, Shane Smith from Ontario, Canada, a comic book artist and alpha male extraordinaire, also an author. Science of Attraction, which is coming out. What is this, part two that's coming out? Or what was the first book called?
No, the first one was a product I did with the Rosh. And then what's coming out is going to be a paperback, like an actual book you can hold in your hands.
Oh, yeah. Far out. Cool. Yeah, I remember combing through that book and I gleaned a lot of gold nuggets. I took my own notes on your book. And, you know, it was quite a trip to look at it like that. 2 degrees of separation or whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So catch the first part of this, everybody. If you're catching us on iTunes, leave us a comment. Basically, you know, we're fusing the ideas in this episode. We're fusing the ideas of spirituality, like a spiritual man, but then also with awareness of the male-female dynamic and mating in a very kind of biologic sense of the word, but then also in a practical sense of it, of like, he's got game or she's got game or whatever. You know, game, basically, the dating game. So I want to hand it off to Shane. My core question, that if I could only ask one question, I would ask something about spirituality. Like, do you consider yourself spiritual, and how does that play into this really hardcore, or I don't know, hardcore is the right word, but like, you know, deeply penetrating kind of research examination of the genetic code and male-female dynamic?
Yeah, no, I do, brother. Can we have a base for what you define as spirituality? Go down that road. Yeah,
you know, things that cause and effects that is not perceivable by your physical organs, and a system of thinking around that.
Yeah. So I think, yes. So from my understandings and research and studies and like that of the genetic code, I always start at the base level of the genes, obviously a sequence of numbers and letters, and then I go from there. So past the biological reality of this, then yes, there's definitely, I would say I don't want to say forces, but there's energies and understandings that definitely occupy this reality as far as having an effect on us that would go past our base, our unit as a biological unit. Yes, I would definitely say there's something there.
Hell yeah. All right. Does that play any role in your research, or is that a significant role in your life, or is that just like you're pretty certain that something's there? And how does that, do you see that maybe playing? Just because the show is called Enlightened Masculinity, so that idea of enlightenment and is a very quote spiritual idea, I think. And so I wanted your take on that because you're such a masculine guy. I was curious about your the enlightened side of you, if you would talk about that.
Yeah. It's definitely there as I see it through that study, is that there's these words masculine and feminine. So there's some sort of energy which we can't even really maybe we can describe it, but I don't know if we can go actually into what it is. But when I look at nature and stuff like that, and then there's these two dualities of masculine and feminine, there's something that created that. There's some sort of intelligence. I don't want to put a label on it. I don't want to do anything like that, but there is something there that has this intelligence or capability to manifest two people from a masculine and a feminine point of view, from an energetic point of view. Like, we come from this code, from the sequence of numbers. So how within this numbers is there generated two bodies, a male and a female? And how does it know to create such a design? Like, there's this masculine, feminine, and then there's that energy that we just know. We just know a masculine guy when we see him. We know a feminine woman when we see her. But what is that? What's emanating from that? There's some sort of energy or process happening that we can observe beyond the physical. We just know, we can feel it. It's intuition. It's an emotion, right? So there's all that comes into play after I was studying all that genetic stuff.
Oh yeah.
Shane, I want to get into some of the content that you've put out on Facebook, because you have been putting out some absolutely phenomenal content for the past 3 years. And every single day I continue to see these just expositions on what's going on between the masculine and feminine dynamic. I'd love to just read a brief snippet from the one today, if you don't mind, and if we could kind of dive a bit deeper into that.
Go ahead, of course.
So Shane Smith said, "Sitting on the sidelines complaining about relationships isn't courage. Staying in an unfulfilling relationship causing dissatisfaction isn't courage. Relying on strange men for admiration and false acceptance through social media, quote unquote, likes to avoid real relationships isn't courage. Disconnecting from your nature because of an accepted narrative isn't courage. Doing things in your relationship because the majority don't do it isn't courage. Relying on outdated and misguided information to dictate the perimeters of your relationship isn't courage. Blaming everyone else for your relationship condition isn't courage. Spending more time watching Netflix than studying the science of relationships and human behavior isn't courage." Can you talk a little bit about this concept? What sparked it, I guess, for one, but then for two, what in this topic, what is courage, I guess, in terms of a relationship, and what does that really mean?
Yeah. So related to this specific Facebook post, this is a part of me that happened when I started getting into the study of relationships and women and men and stuff like that. It really hit me that nobody's actually doing this, and I wasn't doing this to the level I should have been before I started doing it. So once you see the truth and you understand it and you accept it, for one, and it becomes your sort of, I wouldn't say obsession, but it becomes your daily routine that you dive into the truth, and then you uncover more and more and more, you see how many people aren't actually doing it. So to me, with this post, the courage was actually admitting the mistakes and realizing how much I wasn't doing, and then making it a promise to myself that I would go ahead and do it. So once you see everybody else not doing it, you can see that it's actually not courageous, or it's not helping anything. Like, they're doing all these things, like complaining on Facebook and stuff like that. But then when you dive deep into their life, they're not actually doing anything to change the narrative, to understand the truth. They just keep bitching and complaining. So from that perspective of that Facebook, it was an understanding that not a lot of people are actually taking the time to understand themselves, understands the woman they're with, and understand relationships altogether. So to me, it's not courage to do anything but that, actually. A lot of people are afraid to get hurt, obviously, like we all are, but jumping back in a relationship and trying to be better than the last one and understanding more, to me, is courage. Like, all the things that you read is definitely not courage. And that's what the majority are doing. That's why I have no problem going on Facebook and saying, you're not doing it. That's not courage, sitting there watching TV while your girlfriend is sitting beside you and you have no idea what attracts her, what triggers her psychology, her behavior. So I have no problem saying, oh, I could say that stuff all day, every day. There's no problem with that.
So, brother, on that note, what has gotten you to see this a bit better, or understand this more? What is it that you're seeing that others aren't? To put it, I guess, in shorter terms.
Yeah, no, good question, brother. I want to answer that properly. I saw what nature was. Whatever we want to describe what nature is, that's just a word that the English dictionary came up with, or whoever came up with. But this nature, when we go outside, or we go into society, or we go into a jungle, or whatever it is, there's something happening at the base of all the colors and the songs and these units of insects and all this kind of stuff, plant, animals. All this is just camouflage to what's really going on beneath that surface. So I tapped into what was going on. I saw it, like, not visually, obviously. You can only see past a certain point. Obviously, our optics are only tuned to a certain frequency, but mentally I saw it. I pictured what nature was. I understood at its level what it was. And then from there, I could make assessments, and I could come to understandings. So when I look out and see other relationships, I know that they're behaving in a way that nature disagrees with, I guess you could say, because there are specific patterns and data that nature has designed within each unit to act in accordance to a certain way that would keep that program, keep nature moving forward. That's all that nature cares about, is that it exists, right? There's this game playing, there's this software that wants to maintain itself, obviously, and it weans out ones that can't do it, and it rewards people that can, or I wouldn't say people, but just units that can, and all this information just wants to remain. So at the base of it, it's preservation of this software, of this code. and there's certain ways to do it better than others. And that's what I saw. So every Facebook post came from that base of understanding. And then I could gear it towards a man or a woman in specific areas. If that makes sense.
Yeah, brother, I'm tuned with that. I see what you're saying. Can you dive a little bit more deeper into, I guess, as well, the concept of strength? So to me, this is something that I've learned from AZD Arash, that strength, nature follows strength and really wants to perpetuate the idea of strength and eliminates weakness. Can you talk a little bit more about this, kind of from the perspective of nature, from the way you understand it, as to how can men, for one, demonstrate strength to not only their women but to other men around them, but B, how can they also eradicate weakness within themselves?
Yeah. So from the perspective of nature, strength would be being able to preserve, protect, and maintain its code. So that's not the woman's job, obviously. Like nature provided men and women, obviously, to move forward this code or to maintain this code. So in the perspective of nature, strength to me would be the ability to preserve and protect that code through the woman, because the only way the code can continue through nature is to copy it. That's a man and a woman. An egg has to be fertilized. So the position of the man in strength would be to be able to protect and preserve that egg that's going to copy this code forward. So any demonstration of strength in nature is basically saying, I can survive. I have the ability to survive and protect this egg. So if we copy, this information goes forward, meaning nature can maintain its software. So any demonstration of strength or survival to the woman means a higher percentage that egg and that information in that egg is going to be copied, and it's going to be carried forward in descendants, which means nature can continue. So that's where strength and survival comes from the man's point of view. I think you asked me more, brother. Sorry, I just don't remember.
Yeah. And then I guess eradicating weakness, right? So
yes.
There's also, can you speak a little bit more on that?
Right, yes. Yeah, good question. So the opposite of that would be a man demonstrating, or not even just a man, any unit of information, any male unit in nature, whether it's a bug or an animal or whatever. Any demonstration of weakness means I can't protect you, or I'm not a good choice to take that egg, copy our information and push it forward, because I won't be able to maintain nature's software. That's weakness in a man. Any demonstration of a liability to survival would be weakness. Like he's needy, he submits, all that kind of stuff. Any sort of indication that that egg may be in jeopardy of not copying and moving forward is a weakness in nature.
Brother, and just kind of picking it up from the last episode or whatever part that we did, and talking to the genetics, that weakness, reading, what I love so much about interacting with women on a social level, because I teach yoga, so I teach so much, and yoga is obviously in America, in the United States, so dominated by women, but that's a different dynamic. Like teaching women is different than interacting socially with women. I love interacting socially with women because a demonstration of strength or demonstration of weakness is unapologetically responded to by young, old, any kind of woman. It's like a genetic response. And, so talking to the genetics, have you found, what have you discovered on your path of awareness of this thing where you can gesture to the genetics? What do I mean by that is like make a gesture that it generates an emotion in them that they were unaware that it would. They wouldn't have predicted that would have happened, So it created an expression in somebody, an act of high-class generosity that you had never been experienced before would result in a positive emotion in you. And you had never been exposed to that behavior before. So how do you know how to respond to it like that? There's a pre-program to how to respond to something. And what have you observed or discovered, Shane, in terms of talking to the genetics and communicating in a way that signals weakness and other ways that signal strength?
Yeah. Sorry, just what have I noticed in that?
Yeah. What have you discovered about nuances that signal weakness versus signal strength in communication?
Yes. like you just said, nature provided the woman with the ability 100% to expose a man's weakness, and which she's not even aware of most of the time. Because like I said, there's this program happening, like you said, it's this sort of unconscious that we're all sort of hypnotized and puppets to. But because of the unconscious, because of how many cells are actually acting and monitoring the environment, there's so much happening underneath her awareness that when there's a behavior demonstrated by the man to the woman, it's the entire physiology picks it up. She's not aware of it yet consciously, so she's still interacting with the man. All those cells and nervous system come together and say, nope, that's a threat to your genes, that's a threat to your egg, all this kind of stuff. That's a potential in loss of survival. So that acts and then hits her with an emotion, which she can feel consciously, of course. She just feels this emotion like when she's speaking to this guy. So it's like these programs interacting with each other. And then when she feels this emotion, she reacts based on that emotion 100% all the time. So it's going to come out in many different ways. It might be disinterest. It might be walking away. It might be mean to the guy. It might be making fun of him. There's all different ways a woman will generate this emotion from the nervous system saying, back away from this guy because he's not demonstrating survival. That's all the nervous system cares about, is whether he's a source of survival or not. So anytime he generates a weakness or a lack of survival, everything's going to kick in, send her an emotion, and then she's going to try and back away however way she can, based on her personality for the most part. So there's these indicators from women that you're going to notice in the environment. You can even see it in a conversation at a bar or at a restaurant. You can tell she's not interested. She's moving away, but he's trying to force this, trying to convince her that he's a good mate. He's a potential source of survival, but you can tell through her physiology, it's saying, no, get away from this guy. I'm not interested. It's not working out. Does that answer it, brother?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And are there any things in particular that you've noticed as far as communication? What kinds of communication signal strength, and what kind of communication? What could you tell us, like as an example, or does anything come to mind that from your observation?
Yeah.
You know, as a bouncer, you interact with so many people and see so many things. What have you noticed that would be a weak kind of communication or a strong kind of communication?
Yeah. So strong communication is definitely, you could start with body language and stuff like that. Like if you were to observe a man and a woman in the environment, like you can tell right away whether his body language is strong or weak, whether his shoulders are back, whether he's slouching forward, all that kind of stuff, because that emanates obviously from sort of an unconscious level and self-image and stuff like that. But that's still information that's going to transfer to her, picking up as weakness. So body language is definitely one, of course. And then tonality, of course, you can tell it in someone's voice, whether they actually believe what they're saying, or they're confident in what they're saying, all that kind of stuff. All the known sort of indicators of what her strength, if he portrays that to the woman, you're going to see it in her physiology, whether it's actually connecting or not. And weakness is, I've seen so much of that. It's aggressively going in and showing too much interest to the woman. It's basically going up and being too close and just not giving her space, because he doesn't realize that that interaction is just being assessed based on his survival and ability to survive. So if he goes in and he's too aggressive and he indicates his interest too much of having sex with her, the nervous system is going to pick up that he's in a different category than another guy. So that nervous system is assessing him based on he's not very confident. He doesn't get a lot of women. He's probably not a good source of protection because of his miscalibration in the field.
That's interesting, brother. One of the things that I've kind of noticed in society, and we've seen a lot in today's day and age, is kind of society has been going against nature in many ways. So we'll see a lot of men who are displaying very feminine characteristics and women that are displaying masculine characteristics. Obviously, no one knows what the story is moving forward, but I guess the question here is what does nature do in these particular types of scenarios, and what do you see from this? I mean, it seems like it's sparking some ideas for you.
Yeah, I don't see nature lying ever. You know what I mean? Like in an interaction between a man and a woman, I don't see nature ever lying. I see the truth under every communication. Even myself, we all have to get better and stuff like that. But there's just, when I observe other people, wherever the environment, either the bar or the restaurant or whatever, wherever we are, the mall, it's just, there's this truth that you can notice once you understand the base, like we talked about before. If you understand this base of the communication taking place on the genetic level in between two units, then you can see how they're going, how they're deviating from that truth, because nature had set it up so perfectly where there's two behaviors that are going to assess each other, which will bring together and continue that software. So when you see it in the environment, when they're going against it, it just looks weird. It's like, oh, they're going against the program. They're trying to insert a different program saying, no, nature doesn't know, so I'm going to do this behavior and then try and communicate to her. But you can tell in her reaction that nature, the truth in nature there is saying, no, that's incorrect. So it's just easier for me to see the unbalance and going away from nature once you understand the base of the communication.
It's super helpful for me in the understanding and kind of winding this down. And everybody, as you're watching, catch us on iTunes, leave us a comment, and let us know what you think about this. And when we bring Shane back in a month or so, then or whenever it happens, we'll have some audience questions. Absolutely, that I think will really connect some of the dots if we kind of left any loose ends or anything. But it's been really helpful for me. The more you talk about like bringing it back to the base, like understanding the base. This idea of you said this one thing that was so magical to me. What was it like? All the species are it's just a different sequence of the same code. I was like, whoa, that was such a trip. Like, so yeah, when you bring it back to the base, that's been my biggest takeaway. Bring it back to the base and look at this from that clean, unadulterated, kind of primal, basic filter of what's going on here, and then start to slap on all the rest, maybe. So I'm complete on my side. I'll hand it over to you guys for final notes. If you guys got anything that you want to say. Obviously, you guys can find me at ninthlimb.com, the Silent Flute program. The artwork is done by Shane Smith, our guest today. And yeah, join that program. It's mind-blowing communication, mindset, and yoga. And then I'll hand it over to Shane first if you'd like to plug anything or any closing thoughts, and then over to Akash.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me, guys. Really great conversation. Definitely want to come back. Just go, anybody listening or whatever, just go to the attraction code. That is my Instagram. And I do have a product there I did with Arash based on this. There's an ebook and then interviews I did with him talking about this sort of subject and his perspective. You definitely want his perspective and understanding of this because he's at the top. I do have a book coming out that's connected to that. It'll be a paperback book that'll come out soon. That'll be on there. And just any closing remarks would be: you cannot understand attraction or men and women dynamic until you understand the base of nature. You cannot do it. You can't have a conversation. You can't move forward in your relationship until you grasp that there's a genetic communication happening between you and your girlfriend every single second of every single day. You want to understand what that communication is, and you want to exhibit the correct data so her attraction maintains. And that's where I'll leave it at that.
Oh yeah, that was wonderful. Wonderful.
Last words for me is I want to encourage you guys all to check out the Enlightened Masculinity podcast group and join. And as Yogi Chris mentions, to subscribe, leave a comment, and leave us a rating as well. With that, Yogi Chris, I think we close for today. And Shane, thank you so much. Absolutely super enlightening, and really you put us on the forefront of making sure that we help men better understand the masculine feminine dynamic. So thank you, brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you, brother.
Yes. Namaste. Namaste, everyone. Om.